Ask your sister too. Yoda Dodo, what's going on, everyone? Hey, TJ,
Good morning.
how you doing, buddy?
Great. Good to see you, Daniel.
You too. What you been up to? How you been?
It's great. Paul Thomas called me this morning, wanted me to ask you where the best place to have breakfast is.
Oh, tell him. Okay, that is probably the least offensive comment he can make, actually. So that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, I actually owe him a call. He called me the other day. That's really funny.
That's what he said. He goes, man, I was in Breckenridge and I called him and he didn't even call me back.
Yeah, I wasn't there though. I wasn't there. So
I
there's
believe that.
there's a reason for it. Yeah. Dude, PT is one of my favorite people in the entire world.
Yeah, he's great.
He's amazing. And dude, he can throw down, like still.
Oh, he's a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah, like one of the best I've seen.
Yeah.
Um, how's sorry, I got kids running in and out here right now. Thanks. How's everyone else out there doing in the world? Good? We're gonna wait just TJ. So the way these work is kind of get on, we wait for everyone else to join up, just kind of chit chat, small talk for a couple minutes. Sometimes we have 10 people, sometimes we have 60 people. It just depends on the day, and then we'll send it out afterwards for everyone. Wow, which
Yeah.
is pretty well. Andy should be here. I
I
don't
want to
know.
say hi, TJ. Hey, good to
Oh,
see
hi,
you.
David.
Good to
Yeah, it's
see
been
you.
a long time. Yeah, you
Yeah,
too.
yeah. How's your family?
Yeah, great. How about you?
Good. Yeah, good. Yeah, hanging in there. I'm getting a little older, but it's okay.
We all are every day.
Yeah,
A little bit older.
yeah. This is my last year in the 60 to 64 age group.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Next year, looking to clean up.
absolutely.
I think that's because you're going pro next year, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
With your help,
Hey, AP Racing for life. Let's go. All right.
Yeah.
So while we're waiting for people to join, let's see, and Andy to jump on here. What I'm gonna do, and TJ, feel free to jump in here as well, is we had like people sending a bunch of Q&As, like just quick questions. So we're just gonna rapid fire those real quick. Sometimes I answer real fast, sometimes we go a little in depth. If you want to add to this or jump in, great. Otherwise, let's start that way. And we'll just keep on waiting for people to come in. Sound good, everyone? To the group? Sweet. Let's see here. All right, question one. Oh, this is actually a big one, TJ, and I'll let you start with this one. It could be a long one. Ironman Lake Placid, you got a lot of experience there. You and Andy went to head there too. Any advice for people doing that race, especially the bike course in particular?
The best thing that I could say you could do if it's your first time racing Lake Placid would be to pre-ride the bike course as soon as you can. I know that's not super convenient for everybody, but that bike course is pretty special on the Ironman circuit. And the biggest reason being is there's actually a ripping fast descent that if you know it, you can really fly down it. If you don't know it, if it's your first time and your first lap, it's going to be way more challenging. So if you can get out there now, go great. That's awesome. If you can't, make sure before you do the race, you do that descent the week before the race, just so you know what's coming up. Otherwise, I've seen so many people freak out about it during the race. Like, I had no idea I was going to descend this mountain down by the river. I was scared to death. I didn't know what was going on. So that's my biggest piece of advice, because familiarity breeds confidence on that race course. So if you know what you're getting into, man, you're 2 steps ahead of everybody else. Outside of that, man, that swim at Lake Placid is absolutely phenomenal. You hardly have to sight because there's a lane line under the water and it's crystal clear. Very, very nice. The bike course, 2-lap course. And so you get to do everything twice. So you'll learn a lot about the course after the first lap. And then the run course, the hard part is you got to run up the hill to finish. In the first lap, it's really not that bad. The second lap, you're just thinking, man, whose idea was this?
Yeah.
You're just kind of running uphill to the finish. But it's a wonderful course. It's definitely a strength course. So that would be my other piece of advice. Stay on your strength routine this early out from that race, because you're going to need all that core strength to get through this race. And there's no better race to start doing outdoor training, outdoor rides, outdoor runs, because the indoor riding is good for the majority of your training if you have to do that, but you're going to need some long outdoor rides, because the technical descending and then the climbing back into town are both difficult and take quite a bit of core strength.
You're spot on, man. It's good to have a professional in the building. Potts, where are you? Potts, where are you? The only thing I'll add, which TJ actually touched on really well, is this is a patience course and a late power course. So there's a really long, what is that? It's almost like 22 miles that like falls flat up before you get to those 3 bears climbs. Everyone talks about those 3 bears climbs. Those aren't really, they're not really huge climbs. But after 22 miles of falls flat, it's hard. And like if you can have late power in this course, it really makes a difference. So being patient matters.
Daniel, if I can add to that, I've done that race 4 times and I've had the fastest age group bike split.
Let's go.
Is the 1 year that I had the fastest, my age group, not all age group, bike split. I limited my power on the first lap to 250 watts. I was getting passed by everybody, and I thought, this is the stupidest plan ever. The second lap, it was like I was on the Autobahn passing everybody. So what you said about patience, I don't think there's another course on the circuit that patience rewards you as much as that one does.
Agreed 100%. The other thing on that descent that TJ was talking about, I think there's a speed zone in there now. So you guys watch out for it. But I spent a lot of time up in Placid, and for me, I calculated I had to be over 48 miles an hour at like this. There's a sign on the right to be able to roll the hill at the end of that descent. So you can play with that to figure out how you can roll that ascent at the end of the downhill. Because right, TJ, it goes down, 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 and it sweeps and then goes up and then goes down real quick again.
That's right. Yeah, it's right into that town. What's the name of that town? Do you remember? David, do you remember the name of that town at the bottom of the hill? No.
Is that Keene?
Keene, yeah.
So that's the advice for that. Plain and simple. All right, dude, that was great. I'm gonna rapid fire this, and if you disagree, TJ, go for it. But I don't think so. Maybe. Do I wear my sleeveless or sleeved wetsuit? Okay, I'm gonna use Andy's words here. Stop the nonsense. Throw out your sleeveless wetsuit unless you want to wear it out to a nightclub or bar. Wear a sleeved wetsuit. There's your answer. What do you think? Am I right or wrong?
I'm a big fan of the sleeveless wetsuit.
Come on, TJ. Come on.
I'm a big fan of the sleeveless wetsuit. Here's my exceptions to the sleeveless. Okay, if the water temperature is in the 50s, you can't wear a sleeveless wetsuit.
Yeah.
If there's massive waves, you can't wear a sleeveless wetsuit. So
Yeah.
sleeves are faster, for sure. I don't think Andy's ever worn a sleeveless wetsuit. But I will say this, that if you've not been training in your wetsuit regularly, and this is a lot of people, okay, if you don't train regularly in your wetsuit, it's going to be a shock to your body on race day. And so this is where I say a sleeveless wetsuit has merit. If you don't train in it regularly, sleeveless is way easier to adapt to. And then if it's a calm swim and very warm water, it can actually help you too. Sometimes a problem with some of these high temp wetsuit legal swims, the temperature's so warm, too warm for the wetsuit, and you can overheat.
Yep. I agree with you. Here's the caveat I'll say. Get a really good wetsuit and it feels like
Yeah.
it's sleeveless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pinnacle wetsuit. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, it matters.
Yep, exactly. Okay. We got 2 more rapid fires and then we're gonna dive in, TJ. So this is an easy one. This is for me. When are you and the kids coming to Oregon this summer for snowboarding? I am not coming to Oregon, Traily, but my kids will be there 15th or 17th to about the 27th, I think. So if you're up in Mount Hood, come by the half pipe. Okay. Oh, it's a good one. We might agree or disagree on this one, TJ, too. What is the ratio of swim days per week for improvement, staying where you're at, or loss of swim fitness? What do you think, bud?
All right. So my minimum is 3 days a week.
Boom.
My minimum is 3 days a week. Every professional triathlete is, well, I shouldn't say that. Every male professional triathlete is swimming 5 days a week, if not 6. And so if you really want to improve, you need 5 days a week. 3 days a week is the minimum.
Yep, agreed. Easy. Okay. This is a little more technical. You'll be better on this one from me. We got 2 power meters and they read differently. One's pedal based, it looks like. One's pedal based, higher or lower watch. Should I correct it somehow or just use the power meter I race on? What do you think, bud? You know this better than I do.
So what I'll say is, we're talking about 2 things, accuracy and precision, right? So if they're consistently off, who cares, right? Like, because we don't know the actual accuracy of the power meters. We're not in a lab. We can't tell which one is more accurate. So if they're precise, if they keep reading the same thing over and over again, then it doesn't matter which one you use as long as you're consistently using that, and that's your number.
Yep, exactly. Done and done. All right, now we can have some fun. All right, so guys, we kind of dove into that. I put TJ on the spot a little bit here, but for those of you guys that don't know, and I know you know, TJ, owner, founder of Dimond Bikes, world-class professional triathlete. We got in the room here today. We're lucky to have him, especially since Andy didn't show up. Shame on him. Too cool for school or something here, TJ. I don't know. So we got him here for another. We got 40 minutes today. That's all we got. So another like I don't know 30 minutes or so. And so we can pick his brain all things. TJ, I thought today you can kind of talk to us a little bit at first. Just give an overview of your career a little bit, and then why you started Dimond Bikes, because I was around before you started Dimond, and you had all these awesome inventions, and you were tinkering all the time, and it was the coolest thing in the world. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, I started racing professionally in 2005. It's actually, I lived at the Olympic Training Center. Andy was not living at the center, but he was living in Colorado Springs. So that's when we first started training together. I'll give you this thing since Andy's not here. I'll kind of talk about it. So there were like kind of 2 camps of guys at the training center because there were 2 big alphas. It was either like Team Hunter Kemper or Team Andy Potts. And two totally different groups of athletes that would train. But Andy was a very difficult guy for a lot of people because if Andy didn't think you were good or you had potential or anything else, he had no time for you. He was just like, yeah, that's not how it works. But Andy also has like the highest expectation for what work ethic should be. So if somebody is, I'll use swimming a lot because we spent most of the time swimming together. If somebody's like cutting the set, like flip turning at the flags or using fins for the main set when you're not supposed to, Andy's done with you, right? He's like, this is not what we're here for. This isn't how it works. And so I loved Andy from day one when I met him, just because we resonate on that level. Andy is an extremely hard man, and I've got a ton of respect for him. And so I started my career there as a professional triathlete. I quickly transitioned. I left the training center after a year, went straight to long course racing, half Ironman, Ironman. I've raced all over the place, and yeah, for a long time I had a specialized bike sponsor. And when that ended, I just struggled to find the right kind of bike sponsor where I could be involved with product development, because I was huge into tinkering. For those who don't know, back in 2009, I was riding with aero bars in the praying mantis position. And so if you think about that, you think 2009, and now like here we are in 2024, and that's now the predominant position that pros are riding in. So I was like the only one. The same thing is like, I was one of the first pros to get rid of the long tail aero helmet and go with the short tail helmet. Obviously, that trend has really come into fashion as well. And I wasn't doing any of this by guessing. I was doing all of this. I was actually buying my own wind tunnel time and regularly going to the wind tunnel and studying this stuff and coming up with solutions. And so I wanted this relationship with a bike sponsor where I could be involved in the product development, because I didn't want to just ride a bike and then not help make it faster. And it was difficult to find that relationship. I couldn't find it. So what I did was I actually bought an old Zip 2001 frame, and I was privy to this wind tunnel test. I was on the Zip test rider program for several years. I tested all their new prototype wheels, had to log all the miles, and we would take these wheels to the wind tunnel. And at the time, we were testing these wheels on the Cervelo P3 carbon. That was considered the fastest frame at the time. And so we used that as like the gold standard frame. And just for fun, one year, we took this 1996 Zip, 1996 year manufactured. Zip 2001 was the model year. Beam bike that looks very much like a Dimond. And that Zip frame was faster than the Cervelo P3 carbon at every yaw angle except for zero. I was totally blown away. I could not believe how fast this bike was. And so when I couldn't find a bike sponsor, my wife was like, hey, just go buy whatever bike you think is fastest. And I was like, I want the 15-year-old bike that was made by Zip. And she's like, you're insane. So I bought this old bike from an employee at Zip. I actually won my first Ironman at Lake Placid in 2011 on a 15-year-old bike. And after that race, I begged these guys at Zip to bring back the bike, to start manufacturing again. They said, look, our number one customers are bike manufacturers. We don't want to manufacture it, but we've got 2 employees who are engineers who are very passionate about this project that you can hire on your own time to help you develop this if you want to do it. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. Had no idea how much time, how much money I was going to sink into this project, but I did it. And a few years later, 2013, we had our first Dimond bikes that we made in our factory here. We wind tunnel tested it. And at the time, it's still the next fastest bike we've ever tested in the wind tunnel, the Cervelo P56 bike. We took it to the faster wind tunnel in Arizona. Our bike was the first bike to test faster than that bike. These guys at the wind tunnel were amazed. They immediately ordered one for the wind tunnel and said, now we have to use your bike to compare everybody else's bike against. And in March of 2014, we started shipping bikes to customers all over the world from our own little carbon fiber shop in Des Moines, Iowa. And then the company really kind of took a big turn up in August of 2014. I won the Ironman North American Championships in Mont Tremblant, Canada, on a Dimond bike that we made in the factory here. And after that, I had some big athlete signings that wanted to ride the bike, and The rest has been, you know, I can't say it's been an actual fairy tale story. It's had ups and downs, but it has been a giant success for me in terms of brand awareness, recognition, and adoption globally. So it's been fun to kind of watch this wild ride. And I say this all the time still, is every athlete that rides a Dimond is an athlete that has bought into my story, my past, my beliefs that science and engineering are the best way to make fast bikes. And I still tinker with things and make small improvements. And the coolest part about the story is, you know, we made great bikes 10 years ago. We make even better bikes today. We make more bikes. We keep getting better at manufacturing, better at innovating. And I love coming up with new products and new designs.
Dude, amazing. So amazing. I think the best part is you're able to live like what you were preaching all along, and you found it, and like you did it as an athlete and then brought it into the world for everyone else. It's so cool. How hard was it going from like your prototype model to mass production? Because mass production is very different, right, than making one-off bikes.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually quite scary. Some of these prototype bikes that we made, I was the one riding all of them, testing all of them. But honestly, like half of them, I probably should never have been riding, right? Because they just weren't really that safe. But you don't know until you're actually riding it and you break it. I raced a prototype Dimond at Ironman New York City, and I'll never forget Paul Matthews, Barney's veteran pro triathlete as well. And he was riding behind me. And he was like, dude, that wheel was like flopping back and forth as you're riding. And I was like, yeah, I said, we had to work on the stiffness of those chainstays quite a bit. So we just kept learning. And I remember that that week before Ironman New York City, I was up, I mean, after midnight every night that week just to finish a prototype that I could actually race on for that race. But ideal race prep, no, but it meant so much to me to try to be on a bike that we were making as prototype and doing. So, you know, from 2012 to 2013 was our first production bike, right? And that's a long time. We made a lot of bikes in that time period. And thankfully, I had some customers that were waiting on bikes, placed pre-orders, and were very patient and understanding to kind of help me launch. And so without those customers, I wouldn't be here. And early adopters are important in any company and any product life cycle. So I've had a lot of those, and luckily, now I can look at it over 10 years. I've got several customers who've had 3, 4, 5, 6 Dimonds in their life, and we just keep making them better. And they would say the same thing. Like, I was really happy with the first one that I got, but it's amazing to see how much better they continue to get. So it was over a year process to go from prototype to mass production, and it had a lot of challenges. And the prototypes we were making were at a carbon shop in Boulder, Colorado, and then we took that idea and then actually made a carbon fiber factory here in Des Moines, Iowa, which also wasn't the easiest thing to do.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Hey, Andy Potts, welcome to the party. How's it going, buddy?
I suck. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
here.
you're good.
I do have a question for TJ.
Yeah.
All right. So I believe it was 2014. And correct me on the year if I'm wrong. You rock up we were in Hawaii, and you rock up on Ali'i Drive the day before the Ironman World Championships. And you had a camera crew, and you had a belt. And the belt was the Ironman North America champion. And it was like, the champ is here, the champ is here, the champ is here, right? And you're on the Dimond. How important is it to you to bring excitement into the sport, as well as bring excitement into the brand? And then the second part of the question is, you talked a long time ago about pushing a rope, and how does that tie into Dimond?
Yeah, that's great. So thanks for that, Andy. That's actually a really great memory in the company. And I can remember I had like 5 employees at that time, and they were all in Kona. And
Yeah.
3 of them were like super supportive. You're like, yes, let's do this. And 2 of them were like, oh my God, this guy is going to massively embarrass us on Elite E Drive and bike check-in.
No, it was awesome,
Really
dude.
cool, right? So like I'm like in a Rocky style boxing robe, and I had a North American Championship belt.
Yes.
My hype man behind me with the belt over his head.
Yes.
It was awesome, you know, and you know, the point of it was, you know, I just won the North American Championship. I was going to Kona. By no means was I a favorite to win Kona at all, you know, but that wasn't the part of it, right? It's like I'm trying to bring hype and awareness to my company as much as I'm trying to bring hype and awareness to myself. But yeah, it is important because, you know, we want the sport to be fun. And sometimes, you know, it's you look at some of these athletes and it's too much of it's too serious all the time. And some of that just saps the fun out of what you're doing. And the truth is, if you're not having fun racing, you're not going to race very well. You're just not going to be a very happy person. And so that's a big part of that. It was a big part of the company, of launching the company. You know, if Andy steps up and wins the North American Championships this year, I'm making him a belt. And I'll be there in Kona, and I'll be your hype man too. So you know, whatever you got on the plans, I'm there for you. So that's really important. The other thing that you mentioned there was pushing a rope. So this is a really good point as well. So if you have a rope, right, there's one way that you can get it is you can move it forward. You got to pull it. And pulling something is really important for a lot of different reasons. The best way to kind of attract growth in something is to be the light, right? So you talk about, like, if you shine a light on something, you can attract a whole bunch of bugs to that light, right? Same thing. If you're squid hunting, right, you can shine a big light, and the squid are at night, and the squid are attracted to the light, right? So that's one way that really helps manifest things in your life, is be the bright light that attracts all these other things. When you have a rope, there's only one way that you can do that. And when I say a rope, I mean, if you have something that is not intrinsically motivated to go forward, the only way to do that is to pull that. And it's a lot of work, right? So if you have a rod instead of a rope, okay, sometimes that rod is difficult to manage because it's all over the place, right? It's like, you push it this way. And I say this with a rod, it's a lot like trying to back up a boat trailer. So if anybody's seen somebody try to back up a boat trailer on Instagram, it's pretty good. It's pretty funny reel. It's difficult, right? Because you want to move this way, and it kind of it snakes around backwards, and it's difficult to control. But at the same time, if you tried to back a boat up with a rope, what would happen, right? Like if you had a chain attached to the boat, and you're trying to back it up, well, you can't do it, right? So the only way that you can move a rope is by pulling it, right? So you can go backwards and forwards and change the direction if you have a solid rod to deal with. And sometimes it's difficult. It's not always going to be easy. If you have a rod, it's going to be like backing the boat up. But at the same time, when you have a rod, it does great at pulling, it does great at pushing. And so I relate that to the company in the way that, man, this adventure has kind of been all over the place, right? It's triathlon had these awesome glory days with exponential growth, and it's awesome. And in those times, you can say, man, all you need is a rope. You don't even need a rope, because that thing's on a conveyor belt. It's just moving, right? It's just going nonstop, and you really can't do anything wrong. When times get tough, you have to both push and pull to make things work. And so I think that's a lot where we are right now in this industry. We've stabilized a lot over the last several years, but man, we had some wild rides. COVID was super tough on the triathlon industry. You know, and in particular, our business, a large part of our business for a very long time was making bicycle travel cases. We no longer have that side of our business. And so that whole side of the industry has changed, and it's tough because that was a very, you know, profitable, easy business to run, because we manufactured cases. They weren't custom. They were just shipped out. They were boxed up, shipped out, and it was repeatable every year. We had a certain number of demand. Now it's gone. So now we're, relying more on custom bikes, which is still a great business, but it's unpredictable. And so as we move forward in the future, you have to change to these adapting times. And it's a lot easier to do that if you have a brand and a company and employees that sometimes are more difficult because they're a rod, not a rope. But then you can both push and pull.
That's awesome. That's a really good analogy. I like that. All right. So I had a question on that. I forgot my question now. Crap. All right. Well, either way. Oh yeah, for Kona. If Andy goes back to Kona, I don't think we're gonna have the champ belt. I think we're gonna get him a walker and bicycles. And he can work his way up there. I think it'd be good though. All right. So listen, guys, we got TJ. You started this as an athlete, like looking for advantages. So you turned every corner, turned over every stone, right? And now as a business owner, you're doing the same thing and you're doing it. I actually want to ask a couple other questions about your mountain bikes and your gravel bikes too, but I'm not going to go there yet. So you turned over every stone, and people, if you have questions, please ask them. What do you think when you're building your bikes, you're learning from these other ones, the number one advantage is like, what makes Dimond different, first of all, in terms of aerodynamics, right? Of why it's faster. And then what can athletes do? Let's say they don't ride a Dimond. What are the top 3 things they can do for themselves besides get on one? Because that is number one, of course. So what do you think?
Yeah. So first of all, what makes a Dimond faster? So again, it's not my invention for a beam bike. I just took old wind tunnel studies, old bike designs, and I took one that was ridiculously fast. And so for those who don't know, after the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia, all the medals in the cycling sports were won by crazy bike designs. And at that time, the most aerodynamically advantageous bike was this Zip beam bike design. And so 1997 rolls around, Cycling Federation banned all these crazy designs. And they said, we want this to be about the drugs the athletes take, not the bikes. No. They didn't say the drugs. They said, we want this to be about the bikes, not, we don't want this to be about the bikes. We want
Hot
this to be,
Hot take.
So they banned the bike designs, but they've always been allowed in triathlon. And so because they've been allowed in triathlon in the late 90s, the triathlon market was too small to kind of withstand these innovations and ideas. So I took this old design and I just modernized it. I made it faster. But what makes a beam bike so fast is 2 things. One, it provides a little bit of vibration dampening, so it makes it more comfortable. But the biggest advantage comes in the aerodynamics, and that's when it's at yaw. So when the bike is turned like this and the wind hits the bike from the side, because there's nothing in the back for it to interfere before it hits your rear wheel, it's crazy, crazy fast at yaw. And the best place that you see this is when you're riding on a descent, like Lake Placid, and there's a crosswind, the wind's coming from the side. There just really isn't a faster bike. And it's hard to explain unless you're actually riding one, but you will be able to coast past people pedaling significantly harder than you, coast past them on these descents because the bike does so well in that crosswind. And like I said, the second part of that is just the comfort of having a little bit of high frequency road dampening. So if you're racing in, say, Lubbock, Texas at that old half Ironman or anywhere where there's chip seal on the road, it makes a huge, huge difference in how your back feels when you get off the bike. And that's the other thing is the older you get, the more that becomes important that you want your back to feel good as you get off the bike and you try to run. So those are the things that make Dimond a little bit faster. And then you had one other thing that you asked me that I'm forgetting, Daniel.
Top 3 things if someone's not riding a one of your bikes that they can do to help improve their aerodynamics or whatever else on their bike.
Yeah, so the number one thing right now is going to be investing in a cockpit aero bar system that allows you to be in the right position. So this is a massive change, and Andy will remember all these changes too, because I was one of the first ones to jump on this trend. But 20 years ago, everyone was riding as slammed and as low as they possibly could. And so the idea was make these tiny short head tubes on the bike, negative stems, drop the bars as low as possible, and that's fast. Well, a lot of people still have these bars on their bike that are super, super low. And in reality, they would most likely be faster if they rode bars that were higher, tilted up a little bit more, but also way more comfortable, which is another huge part of Ironman. Is if you're trying to stay in the aero bars for 5-6 hours, you have to be in a position that's comfortable. And all the wind tunnel testing I've done, I've found positions that are crazy fast, but unrealistic to hold for 5 or 6 hours. And you can see this, the guys in the Tour de France and their time trial positions, you see some of these guys with their elbows touching and their hands in front of their face. And like, you look at that and said, there's no way you could hold that for an Ironman, even with hours of training. It wouldn't be comfortable. But you can find this really fast position that, again, is a little bit uncomfortable. So you can train to get into it and be comfortable. So investing in that aero bar is probably my number one thing. The second thing I'm going to say is to invest in a fit. So once you have the aero bar that has the adjustment, the second thing is to get a professional fit. And it's tough because a lot of fitters are going to totally ignore the aerodynamics of the system. So I challenge you to find a fitter who's well-versed in the triathlon space that is saying, hey, we want to make you both aerodynamic and comfortable. And so there are a bunch of fitters that take this into account. My last thing that I'm going to say is to invest in the right aero equipment. Then the number one thing that you can do is have a fast aero helmet. The number two thing is to have the right tire wheel combination on your bike. Those are going to be your biggest time improvements. A bad aero helmet can actually cost you a ton of time. There's not a huge difference in wheels right now, but one of the biggest problems we see with wheels are wheels and tires matter a lot together. So the integration of the two pieces make a huge difference. And then how you're running them. So tubeless is kind of taking the center stage right now in wheel development. And I would encourage people to jump on that train as well. That I think once you make that leap to tubeless, you'll enjoy the benefits, but also the improved rolling resistance as well.
All right. So follow up to that. Fitter, you got any ones you really like? You want to give a shout out to your buddies here?
Yeah, sure. I think there's two guys that I would consider top 5 globally that are somewhat accessible. One in Boulder, Ivan O'Gorman, and Ivan and Matt Steinmetz are both kind of there. Steinmetz doesn't really do this full time anymore, so he's a little more difficult to get into. But both of those guys are in Boulder. They're kind of in the same camp of what they're doing. Very fit centric and very aerocentric as well. And then if you're on the East Coast, I've got a guy that I think is absolutely phenomenal at Acme Bike Company named Jonathan Blyer. Jonathan uses both Retool and the Guru Fit system. And yeah, I consider those guys top 5 guys in the world. I've got other guys. If you're in the Dallas area, I've got a buddy Craig down there. That's a physiologist that's really good at fitting triathletes. Yeah, those are the guys I'm going to give shout outs to now. And I'm not trying to offend anybody else that I send people to for referrals. These are guys that I believe are at the very cutting edge of both aerodynamic studies and fit performance.
Yeah, when this goes out to our 1 billion followers, some people are going to be really upset you didn't mention that.
Probably.
Steinmetz he and Ivan are my favorite.
Yeah.
Andy, you remember a couple of years ago, I went to Steinmetz and I was like, I was in such a good position. I was like, this doesn't feel right. I couldn't drive power. And he's like, oh, your hip angle's off by this much. And because of that, and we changed one little thing, and I was like, Andy couldn't even keep up with me anymore. It was nuts. I don't know.
I want to go back. Sorry, Dan, you got one?
I was going to ask about tires and wheels. Was that
okay?
Go.
No, I was gonna actually go back to the frame.
Yeah.
And this has to do with like a missing tube. So when you look at the seat tube on the Diamond, that it doesn't exist. And then there are other companies out there that have taken tubes away. What makes a seat tube the best piece to remove if you're going to have like a two-piece frame instead of the standard triangle? And then we've got the top tube missing on some bikes, and we've got the down
Down
tube
to,
missing on some.
yeah.
Yep.
So the biggest reason it's the same, it's the same reason that putting a water bottle on your down tube is faster than putting a water bottle on your seat tube. Okay. The reason is if you remove the seat tube, that's vertical, right? So when the wind hits the vertical tube, it causes the most amount of drag. So same thing, if you're riding a road bike and you're looking for the most aerodynamic place to put one bottle, it's always on the down tube because then it sets the bottle at an angle on the tube, which makes it way more aerodynamic because it's hitting it the wind hits it at an angle. When you put the bottle on the seat tube and it's straight up and down, it becomes very difficult to improve your aerodynamics because it just hits it at straight on. It hits way too much surface area of it. So the seat tube is doing that exact same thing. It causes a lot of drag. And I know there's people out there that are saying, but I had this Cervelo P3 that had this wrap around my wheel and it just acted as a fairing to the wheel. That's true. That's what Cervelo's design did really well. And it's not wrong. The difference though is that air moves a lot faster over something that's moving than something that's standing still. So if the air actually hits the wheel that's moving, that's a lot cleaner airflow that comes off of it than if it's hitting something that's stationary. So the wheel provides greater aerodynamic benefit than a seat tube.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right, so I want to go back to something you said
The
earlier.
worst tube to remove is the top tube, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you need a city bike that's easy to get on and off of, it's the most convenient.
I feel like we should rebrand all that one brand, City Bikes instead. That'd be pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about tires and wheels, but I had another question for you. My understanding was you were talking about yaw angles earlier, right? At certain speeds, yaw angles come to a certain, like they all like come into a certain angle, right? Is that true? Or am I misreading that? And how does that affect design?
Yeah, so the faster you travel, the less the yaw angle is effectively, right? So the
Yeah.
less effective yaw angle. So if you're going 200 miles an hour in a jet and there's a 30-mile-an-hour crosswind, then the yaw angle is not 30 because you're going 200 miles an hour. It approaches zero. It's almost impossible. The yaw angle is almost never 0 degrees. It's almost always a fraction of this. But the faster you go, the lower the effective yaw rate is, right? So if we look at a straight on crosswind at 90 degrees, right? So that's 90 degrees. That never actually happens because you're moving forward. Right. So you're never going to see that. That's why we usually test from 0 to 30 degrees, because that's where all of the yaw angle actually happens. Right. So in just this small little pie shaped piece. And so you could say, well, I had a straight crosswind, but as your bike's moving forward, that makes it so the effective yaw angle is much lower, which is why we would say, let's measure that at 30. And the speeds we're traveling on bikes, this is another thing that's very difficult, is compared to an airplane, a bicycle is moving so slow, the aerodynamics are totally different, right? And so we have a lot more yaw angle on a bicycle than we do on an airplane.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And now going back to tire wheels, you mentioned tubeless. Is there an optimal tire wheel combo and pressures, or does it really depend on road condition and course at this point?
I mean, it depends on so many different things, right? So the biggest one is going to be the width of the tire and then the width of the rim. So what happened, and Andy and I have been doing this long enough, we remember riding tubular tires that were 19 millimeters on these tiny little narrow rims.
At 140 PSI.
Yeah, 160 PSI
Yeah.
sometimes, right? I mean, it was pretty wild, right? So what's happened is we've gone wider. And the reason we've gone wider is the rolling resistance of the tire then decreases. And the best way to explain this is that if you're on that super skinny tire, what then happens is the contact patch on the ground is really long. Okay, so the part of the tire that hits the ground is really long if it's super narrow. So when you make the tire wider, the contact patch on the ground is shorter. Now, there's obviously an optimal amount of tire that's on the ground, because you can't say, well, let's just put a car tire on there and that'll have even lower rolling resistance, right? Well, that's actually going to be much higher rolling resistance, because if you compare a patch this big to a patch this big, it's going to increase the rolling resistance. So where we've kind of settled right now with tire and rim width, and all of this will change over the years, but right now, most pros are racing with 25 millimeter tires, at least in the front. And the reason pros are on a little bit narrower tires than some other people is the faster you go, the more the aerodynamics of the tire and wheel matter. So we still know that narrow tires aerodynamically are faster, but if it comes at a greater cost of rolling resistance, then we just have to do the calculation, do the math to determine how much aerodynamic benefit do I have versus how much rolling resistance drag am I creating. So we will see most pros right now riding 25 millimeter tires, but they're going to be riding those tires on wide rims. So you got to throw out those, tubular rims that were 18 millimeters wide, and then the tire would bulge massively over the rim, which just makes a non-aerodynamic system. So some of the tires, I'd still say the tire that most people are riding in triathlon is the Continental Grand Prix 5000. It's a super aerodynamic tire because it's made in a mold, and so the sidewalls are relatively flat on it. So a lot of the tires are not made in a mold, and they bulge like a full circle. So they come around, and that bulge is really hard to make into an aerodynamic shape. So Conti did a good job of making a tire that's really fast. They have a faster tire than the GP 5000. They have a TT version that is more aerodynamic and lower rolling resistance. The GP 5000 is probably the most popular because it also has the black chili for rolling resistance and puncture protection. So, and I know this is just one brand and they're not sponsoring me, they're not doing anything, but I did a race last weekend and I rode GP 5000s. Primarily because I think it gives you a really good mix of performance, puncture protection, rolling resistance, and aerodynamics. So I just went out and bought those tires, right? It's also probably what I would recommend most people use. There are low rolling resistance tires out there. The Vittoria Corsa Speed, they're graphene tires. They're super fast. You'll see a lot of pros ride on them. They're also crazy prone to flatting because there is no puncture belt in them. And so we've seen many pros, Andy's been a part of this. We've seen many pros have their whole race ruined with a double flat, 10 miles into a race. And so it's like, how much did that improved rolling resistance help you if you're out of the race, right? And so there's a risk reward with this. And again, it's a little bit different for the pros who are racing the very high end and doing it for money versus the age grouper. And so if I'm recommending to an age grouper, I want to recommend a tire that I think is crazy fast, super low rolling resistance, aerodynamic, and likely to last the entire race without a puncture.
Oh, that's perfect. And then first, how'd your race go last weekend? Did you bring the belt?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the shape I was in even 5 years ago, right? But I got smoked pretty bad by a young 29-year-old pro.
Okay.
I beat one other. These are like local pros, right? And not guys right? But I beat some other pro from Minnesota. But I'm not racing to win. I'm not training to win right now. I'm very much into the lifestyle side of it. I still. I swim 3 days a week. I swim an hour and a half. So I'm right around 5,000. I swam 5,000 meters this morning. I run the least because it's the hardest on my body, and everybody who's aging knows what that's like. So I swim 3 days, bike 3 days, try to run 3 days a week. I also play soccer and play tennis and pickleball. And so I try to stay active. And for me, the triathlon right now really is about the lifestyle. Like I have this addiction to it. I don't want to stop. So I'll find an excuse to race at least once a year, every year. And then the other thing is I coach all these kids all summer, right? So I got like 60 kids in the kids triathlon group that I coach all summer.
Oh, that's awesome. Are they all on mini diamonds?
A bunch of them are. I make really cool, like we call them the Radiant Juniors. It's a cool little kids bike that goes from 24-inch wheels all the way to 700C on the same frame.
Oh, wow.
And so basically kid's a kid from like 8-ish years old to 14, 15 on the
That's
same
awesome.
bike. So, I did that just because I had kids in this age range, and I was like, same thing. I made a Dimond balance bike when I had kids too. As I was just like, you know what, I'm not going to go buy some piece of crap for my kids. I just go make the nicest thing out there, right? So, I've got a bunch of kids that race on Diamonds. I think it's cool, but it's also it's a carbon bike. It's expensive, so I realize it's not for everybody, and I encourage a lot of people to just go buy a secondhand bike to do some triathlons for the summer. As I'd rather have you involved in the sport than think it's a sport that you have to spend $5,000 on a bike for a kid.
Indeed, indeed. All right, so I had a question about that then. So like you've gotten into gravel bikes and you've gotten into mountain bikes now too. Is that because you've been riding these more and you wanted to make them? And then how does what you learned with Dimond help with mountain bikes? Because mountain bikes less about aerodynamics. What are you looking at when you're doing that and doing the gravel stuff too?
Sure. So you're absolutely right about that. I actually ride my gravel bike more than any other bike right now. I just shipped Andy's dad a gravel bike right now. So I got Mama and Papa Potts both riding Dimond gravel bikes with flat bars. They're actually really cool setups. They're super fun to ride. They don't have drop bars. They just have a flat mountain bike bar. It's the FSA Vision Tech flat mountain bike bar with like the integrated case. They look so cool. They're awesome and they're cool, fun to ride. So I started that way. I was spending more time on a gravel bike, and then we've got some kind of cross country mountain bike trails. And so I coach triathlon practice on a road bike with kids. I ride my gravel bike most of the time when I'm out riding. And then the mountain bikes, what a fun time to spend with your kids, teaching them riding skills and developing. So all the bikes that we make at Dimond right now, all the bikes we make are go fast bikes, right? So I've got an aero gravel bike, I've got an aero road bike, and I've got a really fast, aggressive cross-country mountain bike. So there are aerodynamic features on all of these bikes. But again, mountain bike, one, most of the time you're not going fast enough. Two, there's very little wind usually on mountain bike courses because you're in the woods. So the aerodynamics matter a lot less, but they still matter. But the geometry matters a ton. So it's not all about aerodynamics. It's also about the geometry of the bikes. And so I have spent hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours developing all these bikes, testing all these bikes, working on them just to make sure that I'm not just making any bike, I'm making crazy fast bikes because that's me. That's what I love.
Yeah. How much is the geometry on your cross country bike and like compared to something else I'd see out there?
So we have we have 3 models of cross country bikes. We've got a hardtail. We've got a really fast full suspension bike called the Rock. And then we have a more relaxed version of the Rock with more travel called the Rock R. It's actually what I'm giving Andy here very soon. It just got painted. So I got his son, Boston, the faster one, the original bike, because he needs it, right? So if you're a mountain bike racer, you want a steeper head tube on the bike because you want better handling on the bike, right? If you are Andy and you just want to ride with your son, like Andy's going to want more travel because he's not as good of a rider as his son, right? So when he makes a mistake, he wants the extra suspension in the bike to make up for his mistake, right? The other thing that someone like Andy wants is he wants the longer wheelbase of the relaxed head tube on his bike versus son who wants a shorter wheelbase because he's going to be twitchier and faster. And he's going to be hopping through stuff. And, Andy's going to be like, more like Andy skiing, right? He's going to take wider turns and do this, right? And so the bike is actually going to help Andy be a better rider, but it's also the other model, the regular rock, makes Boston fast, right? He's fast. He needs a bike that responds to him, and he needs a bike that helps him respond to the trail, not the other way around, right? So the Rock R is our newest mountain bike, and it's been an industry trend. We've seen some of these guys racing, but the less technical single track that you're riding cross country, the more you want that relaxed angle. And the less technical you are as a rider, the more you want that as well. And so it's just the bike's more forgiving. And so the Rock R is more of a mass adoption cross-country race bike. So it would compare pretty similarly to like the Specialized Epic Evo. So it's just a little more relaxed geometry.
And then I don't know that this is a question I don't know the answer to, obviously. But when you start riding downhill bikes, you want more slack, right? Because so you can for the true downhill. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So cross country is a discipline that's about fast racing, right? So cross country, you want a bike that both climbs and descends well. On the downhill side, you need a super long travel, super slack head tube. You want that front wheel super far in front of the bike. The reason you need that is because if you're going down a very steep hill, if you're not a good rider, you're going over the bars, right? But the steeper the hill, the harder that is. Somebody like Boston won't have this same problem on a steeper head tube bike. He'll drop his seat post and he'll put his butt way over the back. And so he won't have the problem going down. He's not going over the bars because he knows how to handle that. Yeah. Somebody like me or Andy, we're going to struggle on that same thing because we're not going to hang over the back of the bike the same way. So we want that slacker thing just to make us a better mountain biker.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm about to beat these guys right now. I rode with them yesterday and they're like, dude, are you crazy? I'm on a cross country bike and we're doing like this gnarly downhill. And like my butt is touching the back wheel most of the time.
Yeah.
So like it's crazy. All right. Posh,
I got two questions.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I got two. Now, one's a little esoteric and then the other one brings it back to TJ. All right. So, are you moving fast enough on a bike for lift theory to come into play? And if so, how does that frame your thinking on the shape of the tubes we're riding when we were specifically going the fastest on a time trial bike?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We actually studied this quite a bit in the wind tunnel. And we saw a trend about 7 years ago where this started to come into play when companies started working on the underside of the bike to fare the rear brake, just work on the aerodynamics of the underside of the bike to try to create lift. What we found was even at 60 miles per hour, we're not getting enough lift to really make any difference. So if you look at a Formula One car, that fin on the front of the car is actually to provide downforce to keep the car down because it's going so fast that it lifts the car up and it needs to go push down to provide traction. We've not been able to create any significant lift, even at 60 miles per hour, which, I realize there are times when, you're probably riding 65, 66, maybe 70 miles an hour is kind of like the fastest most of these guys go down a mountain. But 60 is pretty fast. And like, if you look at the times in St. George is probably the fastest descent on the course. Right around 60 miles an hour or 62, 63 is like the fastest most guys are riding down there. So studying much faster than that doesn't matter a lot. But we saw this kind of dovetail in the auto industry. Car manufacturers, Lexus was one of the most notorious, that actually improved the fuel efficiency of their vehicles by making the underside of the vehicle aerodynamic. So really working on the airflow on the bottom side of the vehicle. And again, it's not creating any lift for the vehicle. It's just because the car is so high off the ground that the stuff that's kind of hanging down and clunky creates quite a bit of drag and was wasted fuel economy. We did a lot of testing, especially with rim brakes, on trying to reduce that drag. And what we found out was that that's so little amount of drag compared to other areas of the bike that it's hardly detectable in the wind tunnel. All right. So that was that one side of that. What was the second side?
Yeah, the second one is, all right, so we got the full flight of bikes available. What's the best way to get in touch with you and kind of explore the options that Dimond has?
Yeah, anyone that wants to talk to me, you can reach out to Daniel or Andy, and they'll put you in contact with me directly.
And you'll be late though, just so you know. He'll be late.
Yeah. I mean, I understand. They're busy stuff. I will tell you, I've never seen Andy late to a swim session when we train together. I've never seen him late to a swim session. I did see him late to a bike session once. I don't remember what happened, but I do remember he was late to a bike session and he was like all out of sorts. But that is like the exception, not the rule. Andy's usually, especially in the pool, Andy's very, very on top of his game all the time. So either Daniel or Andy can put you in touch with me, and I'm happy to spend time on the phone. I would say one of the biggest benefits having a Dimond versus buying another bike is that everything on the Dimond is ordered just for you. So a typical bike buying experience would be you go to a bike shop and they have a bike in stock, or they would order a bike for you, and it comes with a certain size stem and handlebar and crank length and chainring size and cassette. And that's kind of what you have to go with. It's got a saddle on it already, and it might not be the saddle you want. And so some of those things are really easy to change on a bike, like your saddle. Like you could throw away a saddle from a bike that you bought at a shop, put a new one on. What we do at Dimond is we work with you to get everything that you want right dialed in. So we do a very fit-centric approach to building your bike. We work with a lot of bike fitters that say, hey, these are the fit coordinates that we need to be in. This is the saddle he wants to be riding or she wants to be riding. And so we don't put unnecessary things on your bike. And if you want to leave any of those things out, you can leave them out. Say, Daniel just sold you a really sweet pair of FSA Vision carbon wheels. And you're like, I don't need wheels, but I need a new bike. Great. You've got your wheels set up. You don't need that. If you've got a great ISM saddle already that you've been riding and you love, great. I don't need to sell your bike with a saddle. You can just transfer that to the other bike. So everything we do at Dimond, from the paint to the crank to the cassette, is custom for you. And so that's probably the biggest advantage in the bike buying process.
Nice.
Awesome. So I got a special surprise for everyone that's on the call right now. If you are on this call, this is the Oprah setup. You get a bike, you get a bike, you get a bike. If you're not on mute. Oh, wait, all you guys are on mute. Oh, no. Oh, no.
Andy's the only one not on mute.
That's great. All right. Does anyone, TJ, anything else you want to talk about or tell people about Dimond, or just about like what they could be doing on the bike besides riding it? Because everyone buys all this stuff, but they don't ride their bike enough. Anything else you want to tell anyone or talk about?
Yeah, I say this all the time, that if you are, specifically if you're prepping for a triathlon, almost all of your riding, almost every second of your riding should be on your triathlon bike. There is really no better way to prep for the race than to do that. And the longer I went into my career, the more I realized how important that was. I used to switch between different bikes all the time. And then I was just like, man, even on my easy rides, I should be riding this time trial bike because I should be jumping in my aero bars and getting in that position and generating power from that position. And so the more time you spend in that, specifically, the more time you spend in aero, the more efficient you are in race. And Andy and I have talked about this over years, right? But the number one thing most people do is they buy this crazy nice triathlon bike and then they spend 30% of the race not in their aero bars.
Yeah.
And so like if you're spending 30% of your time not in your aero bars, yes, 70% of the time you're still getting a big advantage for being in your aero bars, but we almost could find a different bike for you that you were just going to be in a neutral position and be more aero. And so if you watch somebody like Andy race, you'll notice he spends very, very little time out of the aero bars. I mean, he's looking at the bike and he's thinking, can I take this corner in my aero bars? Because I'm going to maintain a lot more speed and have to accelerate less out of the corner. And not every corner you can do that, but I can tell you, Andy takes a lot of corners in his aero bars, even if he goes wide of the cone sometimes, just because it's faster. And I don't fault him for that at all. You should, right? I mean, you should be looking for those advantages. And I would also say the times when Andy's out of his aero bars, it's usually to stretch your hamstrings, stretch your backs, take a little rest. But he's also timing those really well with fluid nutrition, changes like that, and or corners. So he can minimize the time that he's out of his aero bars going fast. Anytime he's going fast, he's staying in his bars. And again, if it's a downhill, if it's Lake Placid, Andy's in his bars that whole time down that hill, because when you're going 45, 50 miles an hour, it's way faster to be in the aero bars than to be out.
Yeah. And I would say, when I would, like, my whole mantra is like, it's almost like I have a miles per hour where I'm willing to get out, and it's usually below 14.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're going above 14 miles an hour, you stay down.
Right.
Yeah.
So science would say the big drop off really happens at about 12 miles per hour.
Okay.
But 14 is, again, the advantage of being in the aero bars at 14 miles an hour versus 12, where it's really, really small. But the advantage you get from being in the aero bars under 12 miles per hour is almost nothing. And so that's when you want to be out. That's when you want to stretch. That's when you want to stand up. That's when you want to adjust your hydration to fill bottles that you need or move stuff from a pocket or whatever. So that's when you want to do that, when you're going slow. The faster you go, if you're on a descent, just lock it in.
Yeah. All right. So actually one more question for you then, because you just mentioned, we talked about bottle placement on a down tube versus a C tube, right? Where hydration and having the proper nutrition is the most important thing. But if you have to pick, where are you putting your bottles?
So when I race, I'm never putting a bottle on the down tube of the Dimond. So there is a bottle holder there, but this is important. I tell people this all the time. You will never see me race with a bottle on the down tube of the Dimond. And the reason is that bottle negates a huge amount of the aerodynamics of that tube. So that tube shape is a NACA airfoil. So it is shaped like an airplane wing, but it's a low speed airplane wing. So it is made to funnel the air perfectly around the bike. Putting a bottle there negates a huge amount of that benefit. So I train with the bottle there all the time because it's convenient. It's super nice. It's just an extra bottle, grab it. My bottles when I race with 2 bottles on my cockpit. So I was, again, one of the first guys to do this, put 2 bottles on my aero bars. And then I have 1 or 2 bottles behind my saddle, depending on the race distance. If it's an Olympic, I probably have 0 bottles behind me, right? But half Ironman, 1 bottle, Ironman, probably 2 bottles. If it's hot. If it's not hot, if I'm racing in Lake Placid or Wisconsin, I can probably get by with 1 bottle on the back, 2 on the front. So that's a 3 bottle system. But if I'm racing in Hawaii and I'm worried that I'm not going to have on-course nutrition, or, you know, there's the risk that you go through the aid station and can't grab a bottle. I want that extra bottle. And so you see me at a race like that with 2 on the back, 2 on the front.
Gotcha. You've done a lot of races. What is your favorite race? You have one?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you know, those 2 Ironmans that I won are right at the top of my list. It's hard to say which one I like more, Placid and Mont Tremblant. Mont Tremblant now is just a half Ironman, but it's similar to Placid in that it was 2 laps of everything, right? So now it's just a 1 lap half Ironman. But both of them are amazing. Like, I know you guys like to ski too, but I love to ski. So ski towns are awesome. Lake Placid's a little ski town. Mont Tremblant's a little ski town. The vibe is really cool at both of those. But they're tough races, right? So I like races that have some challenge to them, just to kind of break it up. I know Andy does too. So those are going to be at the top of my list. But man, there's very few races that I dislike. You know, Ironman Arizona is one of my favorite races, but it's not because it's a challenging course or anything else. I love it because logistically, it's probably one of the easiest Ironmans you can do. You can stay on course. You can get around without a car there. It's, you know, you can get from the airport to your hotel from a train, you know, like it's very, very easy logistically. Mount Tremblant and Lake Placid, those are the top of my list. Those are 2 of the most logistically challenging races that you could do. But they're absolutely amazing. So anytime you're choosing races, like, all of these things need to be considered, right? Like your strengths, your weaknesses, your budget, your accommodations, the rest of that. Lake Placid, it's really hard to find accommodation. Ironman Arizona, no problem, right? So there's pluses and minuses all over. And again, you know, Andy and I both have raced on 6 continents around the world and had great experiences and terrible experiences. And that's part of the joy of racing is finding out.
Yep, exactly. I had something else. Crap. I don't know. Potts. I lost my train of thought here. It was
No, I think TJ's nailing it. Does anyone have questions for TJ?
oh
Oh, here we go. Chris got a question. 2 bottles on the front used to be super difficult because you were milling and doing your own thing, trying to find out a way for like the lightest but most secure thing. So TJ, what's on the market right now?
Yeah, so I'd probably say the easiest solution right now is from TriRig. So some of you guys know Ben Deal fairly well. Ben kind of has a 2-bottle system that he's using that he made from TriRig. It's pretty cool. The other big thing that's changed now versus 10 years ago even is the advent of 3D printing. So you'll find a lot of these guys like me now, you don't have to actually make the thing out of spare parts that you find. You can actually just 3D print this stuff and make it. And so you can also find a lot of these guys will share these 3D print files for nothing because they made it. They just want people to use it. So, you know, for a few $100, you can buy a desktop 3D printer that you could basically print your own setup to do any of this stuff. And I know a lot of you guys are thinking, look, I don't have the time, I don't have the knowledge to design my own stuff. 3D printing, like I said, you could take somebody else's file and print with it, right? So you can print your own stuff. A lot of these guys will also sell 3D printed bottles. So the guys that designed it will say, yeah, I mean, I'd sell you this for $100. But the solutions are creative. So what Ben Deal has right now is he has his aero bars, and then he has 1 bottle, and then he has the other bottles stacked up on top of it. So that's a pretty popular model. Jesse Thomas and I both rode this system where since we had our handlebars angled up like this, we had 1 bottle in between our arms on the inside of the bars and then 1 on the outside of the bars, right? So front and back of the bars. Now you're seeing a lot of these guys stack these bars. So they band the bottle down the chest. So now you see these guys stacking these bottles in this space to fill this space in between your chest and your arms, right? So anything that you can do with bottles in that area helps make it faster. It's actually faster for me to have a bottle in front of my aero bars than to not have a bottle in front of my aero bars. And the reason is it just kind of smooths that airflow around the whole aero bar system. So that round bottle becomes the leading edge of the aerodynamic profile, and it smooths that airflow quite a bit.
Hey, good info here all day, every day from TJ at Dimond and AP Racing. Let's go. All right, cool. You answered a lot of questions I had, so thank you very much, TJ. It was good talking to you. Good hanging out. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you have an open invite for swim and ski camp if you'd like. Everyone does. You could be a special guest of honor if you like to ski. Come hang out. We can check out Mr. and Miss Potts's bikes, Diamond bikes, while you're in town too.
Yeah. Where are you guys skiing at Beaver Creek again? Where are you
No, we
doing?
ski at Copper Mountain. Copper Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where Andy's parents live. Yeah.
Yeah. My neighbors actually. Yeah.
Wait, you live next to them?
Yeah. Andy used to be my neighbor. Now his parents are. It's like it's the ongoing joke. Andy used to be my workout partner. Now his parents are. It's like
Upgrading in life, right?
I'm upgrading in life. Absolutely. Oh, we had one more question. Tire repair kit. Is there a good spot for it? And do you use it?
So if you have
On
a
the Diamond, there is.
there's a perfect integrated spot for your tire repair kit. So there's an integrated storage box right above the bottom bracket. If you're not using that, a lot of bikes have kind of a draft box kit that you can put on the back. If that doesn't work, my favorite spot that I would use, I remember showing Andy this when we were in New Hampshire for a race when I taught him how to change a flat tire with CO2. But you can actually tape all that stuff under the saddle in between the rails, right? So if you really want all that out of the wind as much as possible, you can get everything you need, CO2, inflator, tube. You can get that under your saddle. And probably the coolest invention of the last 5 years has been these plastic inner tubes. So even if you run a tubeless tire, you still want to carry an inner tube, because if you run over something too big that the sealant can't seal, you will need to, we call it boot the tire. So you put a boot in the tire, and that could be a Cliff Bar wrapper. It could be a gel wrapper, anything that prevents the tube from poking out the hole in the tire. So you need to boot the tire and then put an inner tube in it, and then you can inflate it and get riding again. So these plastic inner tubes pack down to about this small. So they're super, super tiny. So it makes carrying an extra tube super painless. Of course, if you're running tubeless, the chances of getting a flat have minimized dramatically. And so if you do get a flat, usually you don't even notice it. You might lose a tiny bit of tire pressure, sealant will clog it. You just keep riding. No big deal, which is, again, why I would push everyone to that. And in your flat kit, I would go buy one of those plastic inner tubes. And every brand makes them. Tubolito was the first big brand, but Schwalbe makes them, Pirelli makes them. Everybody's making a nice plastic inner tube right now. They're super expensive, so you don't want to use it as a regular inner tube, but for a flat kit, they're pretty special.
All right, quick corollary to that. How often do you refill your sealant on your tubeless tires?
So sealant lasts about 6 months. So you need to refill more often if you've filled a hole, and depending on the size of that hole, you'll need more. But if, let's just say you rode for 6 months, you had no flat tire, that sealant's gone. It's dry, bless you. So if you've gone 6 months, you don't need to do anything besides let the air out of the tire and then refill the amount of sealant in there. There's several different ways that you can do that, but yeah, just 6 months.
So you're saying 2.5 years is too long, right?
Two and a half
Just asking
years.
for a friend. Just asking for a friend.
Sure.
Yeah, it's going to be, so sealant is actually latex based. So it has different stuff inside of it. Some of it has solid components like carbon fiber chunks in the sealant. But the base of it is latex. So it's literally like latex paint. And if anybody's seen what happens when you leave a can of latex paint out for too long, right? Like it dries up and it becomes worthless. So it lasts about 6 months. And then after 6 months, it needs to be just refilled. And you don't need to do anything. You don't need to clean your tire out or anything like that. You just put more in. Because again, latex is water-based. So most of it will have evaporated and the rest of it will just dry.
Okay, it's good to know going forward.
Yeah. Daniel rolled a tire in Mallorca and it was all crusted out. And yeah, he went down. His hip didn't get the good part of it.
Yeah,
Oof.
it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. That's all I got, guys. If TJ, Andy, got anything else you want to say?
I want Andy. This is one of my favorite Andy's stories about swimming, right? I know he made a t-shirt for this a long time, but the more I swim with young kids, so I still swim with some young kids, the more I'm bringing my grumpy Andy to the swimming pool. Andy, when we leave on the interval, we drop on what?
We drop on the 9, so your feet leave on the 0.
Okay. So this is like one of Andy's big pet peeves when he swims. Like I could still hear him yelling across the pool at people for leaving early. He hates it. He hates it. And so every time I use Andy as my example, as I tell these kids, drop on the 9. I'm with him. Drop on the 9.
You
Drop
should
on
see
the
how many people we've made cry at our camps because he's yelling at them, drop on 9. It's great. Great. It's 9, not 8 or 7 or 2.
Right.
Take your watch off.
Right.
Super good. Super good. All right. Thank you very much, guys. As TJ said, you can get a Diamond bike, a road bike, tri bike, gravel bike, mountain bike, kids bike. You can get it all. Just get in touch with Andy and myself. Or you can go on their website and reach out to TJ directly. Just tell him you came from AP Racing because he hooks it up for all of our athletes. If you got more questions about aerodynamics or anything, we're here. TJ's here. You just got to ask. TJ, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. It's a blast. I always love hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, what a cool story too, man. I just love it, and it's the best. So thank you.
TJ, you're a rock star. Love you, bro.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. Peace.
See ya.